Hello.
Hi, Wilfred. You all right?
Yeah. Who's that?
It's Harvey. How are you, sir?
Harvey. Hi. How you doing?
Yeah,
I'm got my glasses on.
David, Leigh on as well. So I think it's good we're all here and we're all working. I think so. If we switch our cameras off and just mute for a couple of minutes and then we'll kick off.
Why do we need to switch our cameras off?
We've got 2 minutes until it starts. We can leave them on if you like. It's up to you. But you look fantastic. You can leave them on.
Okay, fine. Hi. So this is Harvey and David, is it?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Hi, Wilfred. How are you?
Not too bad. How you doing, David?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Actually, what I'm going to do.
Wondering how Harvey's roped me into this, but that's a separate conversation.
All right. That's the skill of a PR man, isn't it?
He's a PR man.
Mm-hmm. So how many people are you expecting then, Harvey?
They're piling out. So I think it's about 40 to 50.
Okay, that's good.
Perfect. Okay. We'll just I think if we all just switch off for a minute and then I will come in and introduce us all. Does that sound like a plan?
So do we leave? How do we switch off then?
So it's just on your screen. Well, Wilfred, you don't have to if it's too much trouble. It's really not a necessity. So
okay, fine. Yeah, I'll just keep it the way it is because I don't want to fiddle and then mess everything up.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
I'm quite happy to hide in the background, Harley. No issue. You're on mute, Harvey. You're on mute, buddy.
Good start. I'm unmuted now. Classic Zoom fail. I was just saying we'll just give it a couple of minutes just to wait for people to get in. So bear with us. Okay. So the participants are slowly ticking up. So I think we'll get started. So firstly, thank you all for joining. This is our second Earn It event. We've got some fantastic speakers. So we've got David Leigh from Bernard Matthews, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones from The Black Farmer, and Julia Kessler from Nicks and Kicks will be joining us as well as a slight change to the agenda. Unfortunately, Jose from Old El Paso had a change of plans, not COVID related, don't worry, he's alive and well. But the way we'll sort of run through the session, the next hour, really is sort of as follows. So my name's Harvey Choat, I'm the MD at Nexus, and we're a creative earned agency. So we specialize in effectively what Wilfred will call below the line marketing. There's lots of different terminology, but we're focused on earned media through creativity. So I'll give a bit of a download about my thoughts about how you create a brand that people care about. And then we'll talk to David Leigh about launching an icon in the middle of a pandemic. Then shortly with Julia to have a conversation about a launch that they did in lockdown from MPD through to comms in store. Short Q&A, and then our keynote speaker, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, to talk about the Black Farmer and the story of how that brand has been built. So I will whiz through, because I'm probably the least interesting of all of our speakers, so best to get me out of the way. But I thought I'd just share my very sort of top line thoughts on how we look at building brands that people care about. So for those of you, and some of you won't have attended the previous session, but the way we look at it as an agency is in two ways. So there's the self part of our brand, and more often than not, as marketeers, we're very focused on the external environment and consumer insight and all those sorts of things. And we don't often look too often at ourselves and what our brand means and all those important things like culture. And the second part, like I said, is relevance. So that's actually how we hook into the news agenda and start to make ourselves relevant to consumers. So this bit of thinking really is about self-reflection as a brand. How do you start to look at yourself in order to build a brand that people care about? And there's lots of things that come into that, and this circle has got some of those things, but the list can be endless really in many ways, but distilling it down is helpful. So the first thing really is talking about the basics. And I think when David talks about some of the work that Bernard Matthews did, this will sort of come to life. But you know, in very simple terms, for those of you who studied marketing or didn't study marketing, there's 4 basic principles of marketing. They're the 4 Ps. You learn them at GCSE: product, place, price, promotion. And more often than not, I feel that they're forgotten in marketing. You may work in teams that are sometimes siloed. So you might have a digital team or a comms team, and then you have an MPD team and all these sorts of things. And often the best marketing teams are when all of those aspects of the business come together. And more often than not, they don't. So in essence, all of us are marketeers in our businesses. It reminds me actually of a CEO, I won't mention his name, but he said, you know, Harvey, I'm not a marketeer. And I said, but you've just developed that product and you've just come up with that pricing strategy. And he went, yeah, but that's different. I said, no, that is marketing. And I think that's really important as you start to look at, well, how do we get people to care about our brand? Well, the first thing is get the basics right and don't work in silos. The second part is culture. So, I mean, in fact, James Watson Brewdog did an interesting TED talk a couple of months ago on culture and what it meant to the business. And it's often kind of touted around as the, you know, the sort of golden bullet for brands. You have a great culture, all that kind of stuff. But there are some brands that literally have 2 people in, or some brands that have 150. And culture is fundamentally important, but kind of what is it? And I suppose it's, you know, people say, oh, it's the, you know, the way we do things around here, you know, fantastic. But it's a bit loose. So when we look at culture as an agency, this might seem a bit crude, but we often reflect back on The Wizard of Oz. I'm sure you're all familiar with the film, and those of you who are not, I suggest you watch it because it's fantastic. It's one of those iconic childhood things. If you haven't watched it, you haven't lived. but there's kind of 4 parts to building a culture and a strategy around culture. So the first one is brain intelligence. So having the insight into the market you're working in. And critically, part of that is understanding your enemies. And that might sound like drastic language, but really, it's a really under-asked question in marketing. Who are you up against? Is it, a category movement? Is it a specific set of competitors? Is it a consumer moment you're competing with? So that represents obviously the, I think it's the straw man, the brain, isn't it? Have the intelligence. So remember the straw man. The second part is about having heart. So the tin man, and that's about emotional intelligence as a business. You are businesses full of human beings. And I think we see more and more and more those lines between work and life blurring, and kind of work culture and life culture blurring. Maybe the biggest physical symbol of that is, we all wear hoodies at work and flip-flops sometimes, if you're really edgy, but that's another critical part of creating a brand that people care about. And the third part is courage. So, it is very easy to play it safe. It's very easy to stay on the tracks, and sometimes that can work, but what often happens when you stay on the track is you deliver increments. And what I mean by increments is you may grow by 1 or 2%, or sales may go up, 10% one month because you've done something, but then they'll sink back down. So having that long-term courage, not just, once now and then, is really important. And then the fourth part is leadership. So you see Dorothy there in the middle, and having those ruby slippers, as a brand to build your culture and strategy around is fundamental. And that can be a person, it can be, founder-led businesses like the Black Farmer, for example, is, fundamentally built around Wilfred's drive, ambition, character, and all those things. It can be a vision you write down, all those sorts of things. But effectively, I think those 4 things, if as you sit there as marketeers and PR people, to think about how you build strategy, super simple. Just think of the Wizard of Oz. There you go. And the third part of it, really, if you're thinking about trying to build a brand that people care about, is story. And again, it's one of those things that's touted around by marketeers and brands. Storytelling has always been at the heart of what we do. We sit around campfires and we do all those sorts of things. And yeah, of course, there's those long-term narratives, and very important for brands to have that sort of long-term core of their story. But the important thing is how you tell it. And more often than not, people tell those stories in kind of flat ways, that, we might do a brand book or a little brand video or something like that. And of course, all important assets and important things, but fundamentally, if you don't tell your story in a relevant way, you're, effectively telling your story to yourself. And I think that's a pitfall for many marketeers and PR people. So this is an example of telling your story in a relevant way, that we as an agency delivered last week. So Brewdog obviously did their big FU CO2 piece, and then off the back of that, with our client Tenzing, we kind of amended that and obviously drove coverage off the back of it. And the story we're telling for Tenzing really is they have a long-term story about sustainability, but actually what we're telling is that actually we understand what's going on in the world and we can take part in that like a human being. So that is a whistle-stop tour, but to summarize, there's a critical thing in building a brand that people care about. 3 things: the basics. So PR and marketing isn't just about communication. We are all marketeers in our businesses, and the more you can drive that through your business, the better. It means you'll deliver more. So if there's anything you can do off the back of this session, go to the finance people, go to who sometimes are super boring. I hope none of my finance people are on here. They're all lovely, but sometimes they be a bit dull. But finance people, MPD people, and make sure they all understand that they are marketeers and that it isn't your special team that sits in the corner and wears funny hats. And that's the biggest thing I think businesses can do to make sure that people care about their brands. Culture, so be a company made by humans for humans. You know, more often than not, you'll get a separation between HR or whatever modern companies call it now. They might call it the people team or whatever. Those, you know, marketing and HR are probably, you know, should be, you know, sat next to each other really, you know, fundamentally, to make sure the culture, external culture and internal culture fits together. And then story, relentlessly tell big ones and small ones. So of course it's super tempting to always make something a big campaign and have that consistently running through the year, but actually the overarching narrative is critical. But if you can tell the smaller stories within that about your business, people will care about you more, because they understand more about those micro aspects of your company and brand that really actually do matter, sometimes more than the bigger narrative. So that is a whistle-stop tour on our view on how you build a brand that people care about, and some practical steps to take away. But as I said, I'm probably the most boring person to listen to. So I will now bring in David Leigh, who is the marketing director at Bernard Matthews. David, how are you?
I'm very well, Harvey. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm sitting in front of a fireplace because that's kind of moody and edgy, is it? No, not really.
I'm not sat in front of a fireplace, unfortunately.
I'm
up north today. Up north.
Up north, good. And how's the weather? It's good.
No, it's not particularly great, to be fair. It's a bit grim. Not that it's always grim up north, but today it is a little bit grim up north.
Well, look, hopefully we can brighten your day with some amazing conversations about Bernard Matthews and
Go
the
for it.
iconic launch of 2020. Some say it saved 2020. That's it. You are the man that did it. So, David, I thought we'd just start the sort of conversation, because obviously Twizzlers has got some history, and I suppose as you went into Bernard Matthews, you knew that, and what sort of led you to the conclusion that relaunching it was a good thing to do, and what you thought needed to change to make it work?
I think tackle that question a few ways. I mean, I think the first thing is, you know, going into Bernard Matthews, whenever you spoke or whenever anybody speaks to you about Bernard Matthews, the next thing that trips off their tongue is the Twizzler. You know, what happened to the Twizzler? Why did the Twizzler go? Or, you know, it's always a conversation about the Twizzler. So that kind of led us down the road of actually, there seems to be, you know, a significant amount of history out there, but also a lot of love for, you know, what was once an exceptionally iconic brand. I mean, going back, you know, in its heyday, the Twizzler sat for us as a retail brand value at about the 35-40 million pound mark, and obviously we went from having 35 million pound brand to zero in the space of about 2.5-3 weeks. So really, I think it was the fact that it was so synonymous with Bernard Matthews, and also our business needed a kickstart. You know, our Bernard Matthews brand wasn't and still isn't in the place that we want it to be, and we're making some subtle changes to that as we go into next year. But that's kind of why we started on our Twizzler redevelopment.
And what was, I guess, I mean, like you say, so that sort of rationalizes why. What did you have to do? Because obviously there was a reason why it got banned. You know, what did you have to do to make sure that when you launched, it didn't just get banned again? I mean,
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the first thing is we knew we had a brand there that had resonance with customers, and we knew that those customers were aging from when the brand was kind of exited from the market. So the first thing we did was we thought, do you know what, before we look into pack design, before we look into marketing, before we look into anything at all, can we actually get a product that we would be proud to sell? So, you know, if you're going down the pub on a Friday evening, which we can't do at the minute, which is quite frustrating, but if you are, you know, and you say, yeah, I've developed the Twizzlers, can you be proud of that? So the first thing that we started out with was, could we make a product that essentially could stand up to the scrutiny of people like Jamie Oliver? Because we knew that all eyes would be on us when this product actually launched, because from a health perspective, way back when, Some of the ingredients now are even banned. We had around about 32 to 34% meat content in our products. We didn't have a single species in our products. It was a bit of a dumping ground, shall we say, for various parts of meat at the time. So the first thing that we had to do was say, do you know what? Can we make a product that's got a very, very clear reason for being within the marketplace, but can we make a product that we are proud of? If you are a parent out there that's demanding value and you want to feed your family, fundamentally, can you be proud and can you feel pleased with yourself when you're feeding this product to your family? And that was the basis for what we started out. So the product was a long time in the development. Bernard Matthews looked at this several times over the years. So the product was a long time in the development. So how do we get it right? How do we get the flavor right? How do we get the kind of remembering that flavor right? But how do we bring the product up to modern day standards from a health perspective? And you can borderline see the traffic lights on those shots you've got there. But we have no reds in our products, pretty much greens. So we are really pleased and really proud of the product that we've actually produced.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that just harks back to that point around actually the way you build a brand that people care about isn't just comms. It goes back to actually, are we proud of this product? Are we, are we relevant in the market in terms of the things that matter to consumers? And then I guess also, I mean, some of this, may have been predetermined. None of us expected COVID, but I think a lot of brands, in fact, I know of a few that turned things off. But what made you decide to launch when you did?
I think you said it in your kind of analogy from a courage perspective. I think there's two things really. You've got, as a brand owner, you've got to be brave and you've got to go for it. But the thing for us at Bernard Matthews was, it's a little bit. I mean, I'm just researching at the minute televisions because I want to buy a new TV, and I know that the TV that I go out and get on Black Friday or Saturday or whenever, I know that TV will be out of date the week after because I get an email with a different technology that's cheaper. And I think the thing is, when launching a brand, is to accept the fact that there is never a right time. You can wait and then something will happen, and you can keep waiting and then something else will happen. I think if you are confident that your product is good enough, that you are proud of your product, and that you have a very, very clear reason for being in the marketplace. So you have a reason from a category perspective. So when you're talking to the retail buyers, you can actually go in there and say, do you know what? This is why our brand should exist. This is the space that our brand's filling, and this is why it's filling that. If you are confident of that, then why wait? And we started our presentation, and what we thought at the time, we thought it would go into, we'd be going into retailers' head offices like you normally do, with samples and cooking up products and doing all that. We went from thinking that was the way to do it to thinking, do you know what? We're in a bit of bother here because, we want to launch our brand, we want to get there, and we have to do it virtually. So we literally did our entire presentation to the trade over Teams, over Zoom, over this kind of format, over Google Hangouts, Google Meets, all different formats. We did our presentation through to the trade. And I think, in hindsight, it was quite a smart move, not bigging myself up for that, but it was quite a smart move from the overall business, because lots of people cut back on innovation, lots of people cut back on NPD. So, the reaction that we got from the retailers was actually that they were really pleased, but also really impressed that we were actually still pushing forward and still driving our message hard. So I'd say it worked in our favor. But going back to your original question, I don't think there's ever the perfect time. I think you've just got to make sure your product's there, your reason's there, and then go for it. Why wait? Because there's always something else around the corner. There's always someone else who will copy you, or there's always somebody else who will bring something else out. There's nothing worse as a marketeer than going doing your weekly shop online or wherever you do it these days, and seeing a product that you thought of on shelf and thinking, why didn't we do that? We thought of that ages ago. Someone's beaten us to it. So I find that incredibly frustrating. So
yeah, I think we've all probably experienced it as marketers. To be honest, whatever it is, product campaign, you go, we pitched that a year ago, and And they said no. But
Yeah.
but no, but that's fantastic. And I think it would be great to round off with sort of your top tip or couple of top tips on how you think brands can make sure they cut through in the next 6 months. Don't know if you.
I think cut through is incredibly difficult in today's market. I think, you know, you've got to have a reason for your product to exist. You know, there has to be that reason for your, you know, for people to buy your product. And the way that I kind of explained it, and when we're going through internally, was that for us at Bernard Matthews, for a brand to exist, you exist on two levels. You exist on a physical level, and you exist on a mental level. And that physical level is when you are when a customer goes into a store and they see your product on the shelf. It's physically there for them to look at, to touch, to feel, to buy, or whatever. And the mental level is all about before the customer has actually gone into a store, before you've launched the product, how can you drive that awareness and that pre-awareness, be it conscious or subconscious, that your brand does exist? And I think what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you've got that, but also you are 100% consistent in your message. So you've got to drive consistency. You've got to be very single-minded to get cut through, but you've got to have a point of difference. So for us, we are quite fortunate in the way that nobody else you know, can do, although Wilfred with his sausages may put a challenge out here, which will be interesting, but nobody else can do the spiral effect on sausage. So we own that, you know, and that together brings fun. That together brings a visual point of difference. So we're quite fortunate that we had a USP. But for me, Harvey, that's it. Really, really simple. You know, make sure that you've got a very, very clear USP to get cut through, and make sure that you are communicating consistently, and make sure that you stick to the right channels. You know, there's way back when, a phrase that's always stood with me is that winners focus, losers spray. And I think to launch a brand and to do what you want to do, you've got to be single-minded, and you've got to focus, and you're not going to lose track. So I think one of the issues now is that there's so many methods of communicating with customers, you know, so many different methods. You know, if you just look at social on its own, and, you know, all the different channels that are available, which one do you go down? How do you do it? Do we go there? Do we spend our money here? What do we do here? And for us, we didn't have a huge marketing spend at all. You know, we haven't got a big marketing team at all. We don't have massive budgets at all. So to be quite clever. So for us, it was about being focused, being consistent, and really driving home what our USPs were about the product. And then internally, because I think just to really finish off, internally, how do you launch your products as well? Because that's almost as important as the external bit. So you've got to get your business harmonized. You've got to get your business to believe, because if your business believe in what you're doing, they make the right product. And you've got to get your company as a marketeer, you've got to market your product internally as well as externally. So you've got to get your colleagues, you know, the people on the factory floor, they've got to get enthused about it. They've got to want to make it. They don't need QS sheets on the line telling them it's got to look like this. They need to know what a good job looks like. So the whole business needs to be galvanized behind, you know what, this is a great thing that we're doing. And you need to get everybody excited and communicate that, you know, internally as much as externally, because if internally your business isn't believing it and your business doesn't want to do it, you know, you can't really hope for external success. So that would be what I would suggest.
Yeah, no, they're really clear points, and I think absolutely right. I think they echo some of my thoughts, David, which is the first time we've ever agreed on anything. So I mean,
there is a first time for everything, Harvey. Yeah. I didn't even say picking the right PR agency either, but you know.
I know. Well, you know, yeah, also you did well there, you know. But look, thank you, David. So look,
No problem.
We'll back up in a minute for Q&As, but I'd just like to introduce Julia Kessler, who's the founder of Nix and Kicks. Hi, Julia.
Hi.
How are you? You all right?
I'm okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. It's a real pleasure, and thank you for stepping in. So Julia very kindly stepped in at short notice, so I'm sure she's going to be amazing. But if there's any inconsistencies, don't blame her, blame me. Okay. So Nix and Kicks, it's probably good to start off with a bit. You know, it's an emerging young brand, isn't it? That's taking the category by storm. But I guess, I mean, we talked very briefly yesterday, just about how the brand started. But maybe it'd be good for you to give an overview of that, Julia, first, before we go into the MPD launch you did.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be delighted to. So Nix and Kicks is founded by two German ladies. I'm one of them. We came to the UK, gosh, many decades ago, and a couple of years ago, my co-founder and I, we thought every time we were going out and didn't want to drink alcohol, we ended up having a white wine spritzer just because we were a little bit bored by the offerings when it came to soft drinks, because we were all full of sugar or artificial ingredients, and we thought we need to spice up the soft drinks market. And that is how Nix and Kicks was born. Nix in German means nothing, and that's because we don't use anything artificial in our drink. We're 100% natural, vegan, and very low in calories. And nowadays, half of brands which are coming new to the market are sounding like that. So it sounds a bit dull and bland. And how we add the excitement back in is by adding a bit of zing to it. And how we do that is by adding a little bit of cayenne to every flavor profile. Because when you strip out all the bad stuff, which are artificial flavors or sugar, you miss the mouthfeel, and we generate that mouthfeel with cayenne. So it's an adult premium soft drink, and we launched in 2017 properly. So that is when we sort of rebranded and reformulated and went back into the market. And since then, we're now available pretty much in all the big grocers, from Tesco to Waitrose. We launched during the crisis, during COVID. We launched with Nando's. So you find us anywhere in casual dining, as well as the grocery market and hospitality. And yeah, excited to be here today. It's been a very interesting year for us.
I bet. And fantastic that, actually, like you say, you've got so many different channels you're going into. So into food service, into retail. It's a real challenge to manage both of those channels in a sensible way that doesn't undermine the brand in different ways. But so obviously, like you said, it's been a difficult year, but you've still managed to launch a new product to market. And I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that and the challenges you faced to get cut through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we launched a new product and a new brand. Actually, we just rebranded, so it's been quite a year. But I guess one of the things which obviously David alluded on as well is one of the things we found is by having to sort of pause, sort of forced to pause, we had time to really analyze and take a new look at the market space. And we are quite a data-driven company, even though we're small, but we can turn data into new MPD really quickly. And what we've done and what we've seen is that in-home consumption massively went up. And they say it takes 6 weeks to form a new habit. Obviously, by end of May, that was there. And then we looked at flavor trends, and we could see that pink now in the UK is a new flavor. It's incredible how many pink drinks are out there now. And we could see that raspberry is doing really well. Rhubarb is massively growing. Obviously, rhubarb is quite a heritage flavor profile in the UK. And before us, we saw that combination in a few drinks companies, mostly alcoholic, but not really in soft drinks. And what we've done is we pulled it together as a team, small team. They normally call it pizza size, but we are even smaller. So just 3 people involved in the MPD process. And we looked at the data, we spoke to our customers pretty early on, and we said, like, here are 4 ideas, that is our recommendation, what do you think? And I think one of the things which we are now known for is that we make very delicious flavor profiles. So people just trust us with ideas that they will taste great. And then we basically did a few testings with consumers and customers, and then very quickly, because we have a really great flavor development house, and they understand us, we understand them, we understand what's feasible. So we managed to pull that really quickly together. And because you only involve, there was only 3 people, you can turn things around really quickly. And literally from ideation, where we first presented the concept to Tesco, to actually getting it on shelf in Tesco was within 16 weeks, which is a pretty fast turnaround.
That's fantastic. And how are things going? So obviously it's difficult, like you say, the trend is kind of in home. Is that where you've seen the sort of the growth and the cut through on shelf?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we see that reflected in multiple different channels. We are in a couple of forecourts as well. And we can see that where we have like a dual facing listing, so singles and in-home, and that works extremely well. And we could see that the growth is currently coming from in-home for sure. I think what we can see is like, even in takeaway, you know, people are adding more drinks when they order takeaway, because they want to have that, because we can't go out at the moment, they want to have that real experience, how they would have if they go to a restaurant. So people are treating themselves a little bit more, which is where we definitely see the impact for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I suppose sort of there's lots of brands on the phone and some retailer brand managers as well. What would be your advice for getting cut through in the next 6 months? You know, things are maybe going to get a bit more normal, but have you got any tips for people?
Yeah, I think you just need to you know, challenge your thinking when it comes to activation and getting product into the hand of consumers. So we set up direct to consumer overnight. So we didn't have a direct to consumer channel, and we built it up within 2 weeks. And you know, people don't really buy brands, they buy stories, to your point, right? What you said at the beginning. And that is, I guess, you know, what we're doing quite well. And for us, we're quite a positive brand. So we have positive stories and positive news, and that is how we create impact. But in terms of activating it, what we found, you know, like engage with your customers as much as you can. So we have people going out and talking about the brand, and we turn a lot of people into ambassadors. People like to support us. And that is where we see, I mean, you know, for example, we do extremely well in Scotland, which, you know, we have no presence in Scotland, but we have a couple of people, and it sort of spiraled like a wildfire. We have a couple of people who live there, who are our friends, and we just keep telling more and more people about it, and it spirals, and it's great to see that. So yeah, so I guess, you know, really challenge your marketing thinking on what you can do nowadays.
That's it. And that's interesting, because I think often, you know, there's probably lots of people sitting on this call going, oh God, there must be some new way of connecting with people as things, you know, remain a bit uncertain. But actually, maybe some of the advice is to go back to the good old, you know, word of mouth marketing in times like this. You know, people are talking more, connecting more. So that was really fantastic. Thank you, Julia. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, because I think there's some questions for people. So I'm going to see if I can work it out. So Wilfred, please join the Q&A before we jump to your thing. But this one is for David. You had to reformulate the turkey Twizzler for relaunch. Is this something you think is needed across other brands in Bernard Matthews?
Across other brands in Bernard Matthews, not really, no. I think, to be fair, on some of our other brands, you know, a wafer thin ham is a wafer thin ham. I think we need to look more at our brand design. We need to look more at our packaging and we need to look more at our brand messaging. You know, our brand needs a reason to be. So we need to innovate within the sectors to grow. We've got to where we've got because natural sort of market dynamics have led us and led our brand naturally to where it's sat now. So in order to kind of elevate and move ourselves forward, we don't necessarily need to reformulate the product that we've got. We need to innovate, and we need to bring new products to the market to excite and entertain the customer under, you know, the brand values that that we stand for.
Yeah, that's really clear. Thank you, David. And Wilfred, maybe just to bring you in on this one. So I'm sure we'll have a view. Do you think it's worth considering out of home or live brand experiences during the first half of next year? Or do you think everyone's still going to be infected?
God. Well, my vision of the future is that it's all going to be about direct to consumer. And part of that is based on this, is that going to the supermarket to do your shopping does not make sense. If you think about it, you get in your car, you get out of your car, you go, you take something off the shelf, you put it in your basket, you take it out of your basket, you go to the checkout, and you got all of that. In the day and age that we live in, is not going to be existing, I would say, within the next 15 years. And this may sound very radical, but I think all the supermarkets are going to have to relook on their model, because it doesn't make sense in terms of you take all of those stages out, and how can, now that you could actually get to the consumer directly a lot easier. And I launched an online farm shop just 6 weeks ago, because now that people are at home, having that sort of business makes sense. So that's my radical thinking. For those of you who think that supermarkets are going to be like they are in the next 15 years, I don't believe it's going to be the case, because, you know, there's ways of making it easier for the consumer to get their goods. Yeah. But perhaps when I do my talk, I could then explain why I'm thinking that.
That's it. Just tantalize them there.
Just a tantalize for you.
I like it. And Julia, just a quick one for you. What channels did you find most effective when launching in the lockdown? Was there a particular channel that outperformed another, or?
Well, I wouldn't say any one were easy. I think you have to just test and learn. And I think for us, you know, like some collaborations work better than others. I mean, we launched with Nando's during lockdown. And I honestly, I didn't have much hope for high rate of sale, but actually we were incredibly surprised because of that fact, because people are now adding more drinks to their take-home consumption. So even like the second lockdown we weren't as badly hit as initially anticipated, which is really good. And then I guess like direct to consumer, I mean, we still haven't mastered or cracked it, but like to Wilfred's point, I think people are at home, they want to treat themselves, you know, they're starting to think about Christmas, they're probably shopping earlier this year because they're accumulating nice things they want to surprise their families with, and I think just be present and be available.
That's really helpful, thank you. And maybe just a quick last question to all of you for a sort of 20-second answer. You've all, you know, been in front of buyers and all that kind of stuff. There's a question here about actually how do you get in front of buyers, you know? So Julia, maybe we'll start with you. How did you get your story sold into the retailer?
Just relentless, not giving up, and just trying always on avenues. I mean, I'm quite a LinkedIn queen, so I chase them down, and you just have to persevere.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Wilfred, obviously you've had extensive experience getting in front of buyers and making them buy your stuff. Have you got any tips for getting in front of buyers with your story?
Buyers are bastards. You know, they are. And I think one of the things I wanted to talk about when I do my talk a bit later on is that the way when I took my products to the buyers, all of them said no, they weren't interested. But the thing that I realized pretty earlier on is that the only thing that the retailers fear are the consumers. And one of the great things about social media and below the line marketing, because my brand has been built purely on below the line, is the power of the consumer. if people get it in their heads that the consumer is the one that really holds the cards over the supermarket and the buyers, that is how you get your listing. And that is exactly what I did, is that, you know, after the supermarket said no, I went on a massive sampling program around the country. And at the time, I always, you could tell that I tend to break all the rules that pisses the buyers off something rotten, because what I did is that I put all of their names, their telephone number and their addresses on my website. I went round, I did a massive sampling program around the country, and people would love my products. And I simply say, well, you know, you get onto that goddamn and email the buyers, and God is my witness, that's how I got my listings. It was about the power of the consumer. And, you know, I love them to death, because without them, this brand wouldn't be where it is today, because buyers are transactional. Brands are relational. And that is what people need to get their heads around. What all the buyer is looking at is the figures, doesn't really understand that, you know, the job of a brand is to create a relationship. And that's why you use the consumer to get through. So that's how I've managed to do it.
Practical advice there for anyone. That's I like it. Vigilante style, Wilfred. I like it.
Consumers, trust your consumers. That's where the power is.
Definitely. And David, have you got any quick 20-second tip for in front of buyers? I mean, I think you've done it quite a lot.
Yeah, we sent them an email and booked a meeting in, Harvey.
There we go. Well, that's what happens when you're Bernard Matthews versus the Black.
Yeah, I think we're in a different position, aren't we? Because, you know, we make a lot of own label for the retailers across our wider business portfolio, and we sell our brand into most retailers. So we weren't in a position where we had to do any sort of tricks or tactics. We literally, you know, sent an email and set up meetings. So nothing particularly interesting from Bernard Matthews on that.
Again, a really practical tip. So, you know, there you go.
But David, could I just say, that is your blessing and also your curse, because you're put into a box. There is and that's what I find fascinating. So I'm really interested to have a chat to you a bit later on, because one of the things about being an established brand and doing a lot of own label work, obviously it gives you access, but in terms of what then does it do to your own brand? And that's what I find absolutely really interesting. Because what they want you to do is their own label stuff. 100 times they want you to do own label over your own brand. So how do you fight to keep your own brand survival? That's the challenge I would imagine you're in.
If you take the Twizzler, we won't do Twizzler under our own label. Not going to happen. So, you know, the Twizzler, it's unique to Twizzler. It sits under a brand, and that's where it is. But when, you know, and again, we've talked about this a little bit on this call, but when you've got a sliced cooked meat product that's a wafer thin, let's take a standard, you know, wafer thin ham or something like that. How do you make that special? How do you make that belong to a brand? Because
this is what I would challenge you.
Differential. There isn't a great deal of difference on the product.
No. And this is where I'll challenge you, because I can't wait to do my talk, because the fundamental thing is this, and both of you talked about your products. And I'm the great believer is that people do not buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I do sausages. There are tons of sausages out there. Why is it that people are buying into the Black Farmer sausages? I could say they're the best tasting sausages in the world, and I do. And I'm sure Bernard Matthews or other people can make sausages just as good and actually even cheaper. So the question then is, why are they buying into the Black Farmer proposition? And that's nothing to do with the product, that's to do with what you stand for. And that's how you create a brand. It's about an emotional connection with the consumer. The consumers think that is tasting much better, but it ain't. It's because this brand is saying something else to them beyond a taste of a sausage. That for me is a key of creating brand.
That's it. And I think that probably nicely takes us on to your keynote, Wilfred. So David, Julia, thank you. I hope you stay on until the end. We'll have a final Q&A. But Wilfred, I will
hand over to me, okay, because I'm raring to go.
Basically, I'm going to hand over to you, Wilfred. That's it. And let you talk. So
just tell me, how long have I got then? We've got about 15 minutes. 15,
20 minutes, I think.
About 15 minutes. Okay, well, I'll try and keep it to about 15 minutes, because it's really good to have a sort of question and answer session afterwards. But what I'll do actually is just to give people a very quick background and then really talk about how I created the brand and some of my thoughts about sort of marketing. So I was born in Jamaica. I came to this country. I'm part of the Windrush generation. I was brought up in a rural part of Jamaica, a place called Clarendon. And then I was then brought up in Birmingham. So you all know the story that in the 50s, people like my parents had a chance to come over here and to better their lives. Now, the part of Birmingham that I'm from is a bit of a shithole. I mean, it's been some 40 years since I was living there. And even now, I still have some pretty horrid memories of the place. I'm from a family of 11. And you can imagine 11 people living in one of those classic 2 up, 2 down terrace houses. So we were poor. We were very, very poor. And in fact, one of the things that I can remember is that I can remember my mother having to try and feed 11 of us with a chicken. And it wasn't one of those nice roasting chickens that you could now go and buy at the supermarkets. They were the old boiler chickens, the old hens. And I can remember my mother having to be very imaginative in terms of how she would tenderize it and sort of give it seasoning. And even to this day, I have a real fetish for a chicken bone because I can remember trying to get every bit of nutrition out of this bone because we were so hungry. Now, as a way of supplementing the family income, my father had an allotment, and it was my job as the oldest boy to look after this allotment. And I absolutely loved being on this allotment. And it was there then I had the dream to one day own my own farm. And one of the things I say to people is this, especially in Britain, is that if you want to do anything, if you want to make any change in your life, you have to have the courage to dream. And I think the theme of my talk is all going to be about courage. And in marketing, especially, it's all about courage. One of the things that used to frustrate me is that people want to get coverage. They want people to be aware of them, but they're not prepared to put their head above the parapet. They're not prepared to be courageous. People are not going to be interested if you're not prepared to be courageous. That's one of my first tips to any marketeers that might be watching this. Anyhow, I went to the local secondary modern schools, as they called them back then. I was one of those people that did really badly at school. I'm dyslexic. So in those days, people had absolutely no idea of what dyslexia was. And so at the age of 16, I left school and I could hardly read and write, left school without any qualifications. And everybody would have thought that I would end up on society's dustbin heap, as most of the people I went to school with, that's how they did, ended up in prison, ended up a failure. Anyhow, I didn't have the intelligence to do anything else, so I joined the army. But as you could probably tell by my attitude and having entrepreneurial spirit and army does not mix. And so you can imagine that after about a year, when them trying to lick me into shape, I got kicked out of the army. So the only qualification that I have to my name is a dishonorable discharge. So I'm around 18, 19 now. And in those days, what was quite interesting is that if you were a failure at everything and you were just thought to be as stupid and as thick as shit, the only thing that was available to you, believe it or not, was catering. And catering is now a glamorous profession, but back in the day, it was not. So I went to the local catering college in Halesowen, which is just outside Birmingham. And luckily, I took to cooking. And when I said as a chef, I wasn't doing anything sort of glamorous. I spent my time sort of flipping burgers. Now, as much as I enjoyed doing flipping burgers, one of the things that I always wanted to do was to get this farm. It was a real drive, and my story is that this dream to have my farm was a massive driver to have the courage to take big leaps of faith and in terms of change in my circumstances. And the first leap of faith is that at the time, I can remember there used to be a very interesting documentary series on the BBC. They used to make social documentaries. And I can remember announcing to my family that, you know what, I want to go and work in television as a producer director. So you could imagine they looked at me and thought, this guy is nuts. And that's one of the things that I'm always talking about, especially in marketing, is the courage to be audacious. If you're not prepared to be audacious, you know, why should you ever bring about change? And how I've always lived my life, and also in how I do my marketing and my branding, is that the key things about making a difference, two things that you need to bring about change. The one is absolute ruthless focus. And any successful person, you know, you see a sportsman, you know, they've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do their training, regardless of the weather. They're up, they're focused into achieving their dream. So, and the other thing is that you need to be passionate. And passion, I think in our day and age, passion is seen to be something that isn't trusted, especially in marketing. The marketing people, they like their evidence, their data, their rational thinking, their logic. And I'm telling you, when I tell you the story about my brand, is that if I went down that route, I would never, ever have created the Black Farmer brand, and the brand would never be where it is today. So the key thing for any form of success is focus and passion. And when people say to me, well, what do you mean by passion? And passion is really important because it defies reason. It defies logic. It does not make sense. You know, the Black Farmer brand as a brand does not make sense. And any innovation, any new things does not make sense. Any creative thought can't be rationalized. And so sometimes marketeers restrict themselves by actually doing everything according to the data. The data, the research is important, but it's a guide. It should not be the reason for you to make your decisions. And I'll tell you why I say that when I tell you about when I created the Black Farmer brand. Anyhow, taking those ideas of focus and passion, I decided if I'm going to go into the BBC, it doesn't matter on your color, it doesn't matter on your background, I'm going to go for it. So you can imagine I wrote to everybody, nobody would answer my letters, rang them, nobody would return my calls. And at the time, there's a place called BBC Pebble Mill, and big studios, and they had a security gate, and they had security guards that would let people in and out of the building. And they were manual, they weren't these sort of automatic things. And these security guards had their huts and their nice sort of electric heaters in their huts, and they hated getting outside the huts to open those gates. So I went up to them and I said, look, I'll do that for you. And they thought, well, you know, this guy is stupid enough to do it, you know, we'll let him do it, because they weren't going to pay me for it. So for months, I'm there opening this bloody gate up and down, letting people in and out of the building. From there, I then met the cleaners who were cleaning the offices. And so I say, look, can I go and clean the offices for you? And they said yes, because again, somebody going to do that for free was something that they were quite happy to do. Now, this is what happened. I then met a guy when I was there cleaning the offices at the BBC. His name was Jock Gallagher. This thing happened about 40 years ago, and I still remember his name. And I went up to him and I said, look, I really want to get a job, you know, working in television. And so he took me into his office and he spoke to me for about an hour. And he says, look, you are not the sort of person that we employ in television because A, you know, you don't have the qualifications, and B, you got a bit of an attitude problem. And then he said this. He said, I'm going to do something now that I might live to regret, but I'm going to do this. He said, I'm going to give you a job as a general runner for 3 months and then seeing what would happen. Now, that man having the courage to give me that break then started off a very long career in television. The key thing in life, when I go in and do the talks with people, I say this: the thing to do in life is to find your guardian angels. Find the people who are going to go out of their way and give you a break. People are going to be audacious. People who are not necessarily going to go through the rules. They're going to actually trust an element of their gut in order to bring about a change. Because you can imagine that if I'd actually gone down the conventional route of CVs to human resources, it would have ended up in the bin. And so every single stage of my development, everything that I've managed to achieve, someone has gone out of their way to give me a break. Someone has been audacious. Someone has had courage. And it's the essential thing about bringing about change. Now, I went from being a runner at the BBC to being a researcher. I then went on to be a producer, director. I don't know how old your audience is, but there used to be a very famous BBC food program called the Food and Drink Program with Gilly Gordon and Oz Clarke, and I traveled the world making food programs. I was the person that gave some of these big celebrity chefs their first break in television. So I gave Gordon Ramsay his first break in TV. I was on James Martin's program the other week, and we spent most of the program reminiscing about the times when I was a director and directing him, because I had a reputation back then. I was a pretty tough director. I was known as the man that would get things done. So I was at the BBC for about 15 years, and you would think, you know, from society's dustbin heap to getting into the BBC, actually you count your blessings, you keep your head down, and you don't stir things up. And I think, again, there's a big lesson here for not just in our personal lives, but also as brands. The moment you sit down and you think that the world's easy, that you're able to predict the future, something comes along and actually whacks you. And there's phenomenal stories about brands that had the market, that had control, and then a new person just came and they whipped them aside. And that's a great challenge that all brands have. So for me, one of the most important things as a marketeer is always have the instinct of an outsider. Always have the instinct that there's someone on your tail, and therefore you've got to be a lot more adventurous than you probably instinctively want to do. You think that you can rest back and be secure. That's when you're in it's dangerous. So in order to buy my farm, I knew that as glamorous as the BBC was, that I would have to leave that and earn some money. And so I decided to leave the BBC and set up my own food and drink marketing agency. So I was a bit like Nexus. And obviously, because I worked as a chef, I traveled the world making food and drinks programs. I thought actually forming a food and drink marketing agency was the next thing to do. And so I was then responsible for launching brands like Lloyd Gross & Sauces, Kettle Chips, Plymouth Gin, Cobra Beer, etc. And this is the sort of stuff Nexus can't tell you, but I tell you what, that the days when I was running my marketing agency, the thing that used to do my goddamn head in was the lack of courage of marketing directors, people in marketing, because what they wanted to do was they wanted to get a lot of attention, but playing it safe. And the more you tell them, look, no one is going to be bloody interested in a rubbish, boring press release that tells you about something that isn't going to make an impact on people's lives. You need to have a story that is going to get people to stand up and listen. But, you know, it's one of the great frustrations for anybody who works in marketing. And the other thing that I used to experience is this: marketeers love above the line. And the reason why they love above the line stuff is because, you know, these advertising agencies, these media agencies promise measurement. They says, well, you spend X amount of money, you get X number of eyeballs seeing it. And therefore the marketing guys could go then convince their chief execs, okay, we spent X amount here and this is what you got for it. And so everybody then feels, okay, fine, that's money well spent. But what I've always been trying to convince people is that the best form of marketing is below the line. And below the line is not measurable. Everything about the Black Farmer brand has been built on purely below the line marketing. That is how you create a brand. It's only recently we started to do above the line. I am a disciple for below the line. And all too often, PR, the below the sign, is an afterthought after everybody gets off on the sexy above the line, what ads we're going to do. Everybody gets caught up with that. But I'm telling you, you're spending a lot of money. These guys charge you a fortune where you could be spending half that amount below the line and you'll get more impact. Anyhow, I ran that agency for about 15 years. That then gave me the money to then buy my farm. And when I bought my farm, my farm's down on the Devon-Cornwall border near a place called Launceston. And one of the things that I've always thought is that it's outsiders who see opportunity. And one of the things that I sort of realize is that there's this big gap between urban and rural Britain. It's as though you're living in two separate countries. So I thought, right, you know what? I'm going to create a brand that is going to try and bridge the gap and to be something totally unique. I thought, right, I'm going to do something really courageous and very different. I thought, right, I'm going to create a mainstream brand, because the thing is about being black. The moment you're black, people think, therefore, you're an ethnic brand. I said, I'm not an ethnic brand. I want to do something that's quintessential British. So I thought, well, what is there that's British? And I thought it was sausages. Everybody likes the sausages. So I thought I'll come with a sausage. I did a bit of research, and the research came back and said that 1 in 10 people had some sort of wheat intolerance. So I thought, right, I'll do a gluten-free sausage. Then the next thing was to come up with a brand name. And I was scratching my head thinking, well, what the hell am I going to call this brand? And then one day it came to me, all of my next door neighbors down in Devon used to call me the Black Farmer. And I thought, well, shit, you know, that's a pretty good brand name. Not only is it a really good brand name, but it has the edge to it. People are not too sure about whether it's politically correct. People are not too sure about actually, should you be saying that sort of stuff, especially in my part of the world, down in rural parts of Britain. You know, they refer to you as colored rather than black because they think black is a bit more offensive. So it's a bit of a risk. So even I, and I'm pretty courageous, thought it's a bit of a risk. And thought, right, what I will do is I'm going to get this, I'm going to research the name. Now, this is a big lesson for you guys out there who live and die by your research. This is the lesson. When the research came back, all the research said, do not call it the Black Farmer. People will actually be offended and be confused, they'll be upset by it. And the big lesson is this. Research would tell you what people were thinking yesterday. Research would tell you what people are thinking today. But research will not tell you what people are thinking tomorrow. That is where you need to have courage. That is where you need to have a vision about where you want to be. If you're waiting for the consumer to be ready, you'll always be waiting. That is why it is entrepreneurs. That is why new brands who are doing that courageous step forward, not waiting for permission, are the ones that bring about change. So as you could tell, I decided to call it the Black Farmer. And then it was then trying to sell it into the supermarkets. And as I said to you, it was a nightmare trying to get it past the buyers, because again, people were confused. They were thinking, well, a British brand, because if you look at my branding, it's the flag selling a British breakfast sausage, black guy, it's the sausages for black people. It was totally sort of confusing. But because I come from the background of below the line marketing, I understood that I could be, you know, I'm not like David, who has a nice cozy relationship and with the supermarkets, and all the big manufacturers have cozy relationships because they do a lot of own label stuff. If you're a new kid up the block, you know, they don't like new suppliers. You know, you're a fucking pain in the ass. You know, they want to deal with the big boys. And so I knew that if I stood any chance of getting in, I needed to get the consumer on side. And because I spent 15 years understanding the power of the consumer, and when I launched my brand, it was launched at a big revolution. In fact, it was the big internet revolution that social media did not exist. Being able to do this sort of stuff did not exist. Facebook had just started. In the past, the only way to get to your consumer was through these gatekeepers, which was TV, radio, magazines, newspapers. But when I launched, you were then able to get direct access to your consumer. And then I knew the power of that access. And as I said before, I went and did massive sampling programs around the country. And I'd say to the consumers, you know, go please write to the buyers. And they did, and that's how I got my my listing. The brand's been around 15 years, and that's, you know, we went from sausages, we do a variety of products. We're in all of the supermarkets in various degrees. I just did something pretty major for October for Black History Month, which is that I got every single supermarket except for bloody Iceland to get behind this Black History Month initiative, even Marks and Spencer's. to support something like that. So let me finish off here, because I'm sort of realizing I'm rabbiting on for too long. The key thing that I've always said, and I'm a great believer in this, is far too often, especially in food and drink, people believe it's the product are the reasons why people buy it. And as I indicated earlier on, that is not my experience. Everybody expects your product to be good quality. Everybody expects your products to be have value. So the key thing then is, well, what else? What is the other reasons why they are buying it? And that's about a relationship. All too often, the food industry has been transactional. It's been traders, and they do not understand the power of the relationship. It's the commercial guys are the ones that have controlled it. I believe that COVID is going to teach us a big fundamental lesson, which is that actually brands are about relationships. The investment, the strategy of our business is that our customer is king, and no one messes around with that customer, because they are our sales force and we treat them really, really well. So I'd like to finish by saying this, I'm a real advocate of below the line marketing. I think it's underestimated by marketeers, but it's the thing that actually will secure your future if you understand the power of it.
Fantastic, Wilfred. Thank you. That was great, and fantastic to hear the story so far back as well. Do you know what I mean? It's amazing. I mean, I can't believe you got discharged from the army.
You can imagine why.
I can. Yeah. Is there anything specific you did, or was it a collection of naughtiness?
If you're a mouthy black guy, you're going to get your head kicked in. You either do what the fuck you're told, or you're going to cause trouble. And if you're an entrepreneur, the whole basis of being an entrepreneur is that you're always challenging. It's a bit like being a challenger brand. You don't accept the status quo. If somebody says, go left, you says, no, you're going to go right. One of the things I love about being a marketeer is that you're always challenging conventions. You're always trying to find a different way of seeing and doing things. So for example, looking at David's Twizzlers, I'm thinking, oh, a sausage Twizzler. There's always interesting things. It's about allowing that creative side to sort of come out.
Absolutely. And David and Julia, would you like to join us just for the last Q&A, which we've got just a couple of minutes to run through. We'll just try and run through a couple. I think we've got about 5-6 minutes left. So Wilfred, this one's for you. What lessons can large brands, established brands, learn from your approach to marketing?
You see, I think that if you're established, as I was saying to David before, it's a blessing and it is a curse. Because what's happened is that, in a sense, people have an image. So that's why the Bernard Matthews job, I think, is a fascinating job. Because, that brand came from a very inspirational entrepreneurial background. I mean, I remember old Bernard and his thing. It's quite iconic. But as brands go through what I call the growth of, you start off as a child, a teenager, and then the moment you become an established parent, there's a different expectation of you. And what I say to like Bernard Matthews, you need some people like me in your organization that are going to ruffle the feathers a bit, that's going to challenge things. Because actually what then happens is that you then become the prisoners of own label. Because at the moment, these guys, what they did, I think, was fascinating in the 80s. They realized there's a shitload of money to be made by getting rid of brands and then dominating with sort of own labels. And that's why big brands like Bernard Matthews really struggled, because they'd go to them and says, well, you either do own label and we'll pay you, or you bugger off and get somebody else. But I think that the climate is now shifting back to brands. People want to have sort of relationships. I think they're going from what was purely transactional into sort of relational. And I think that, big brands, especially if you've got a heritage like Bernard Matthews, is to really, really push on that heritage, because that is what makes you different to anything else out there.
And thanks, Wilfred. And that leads on to a question for you, David, actually, which is around, obviously the Twizzlers are iconic, and we had that nostalgia, and obviously launched that single message around, greatest comeback of the century. How do you keep that momentum going? Without giving away too many secrets, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of how we keep that momentum going, we're going to be consistent in the message that we push, and we are going to, you know, like Wilfred said, you know, we're not going above the line. There's no ATL spend planned for Bernard Matthews, or if there is, I don't know about it. And we're going to innovate to do that. So we've got a limited edition product that's going into the #1 frozen retailer next week. So that's going into those guys next week. That will generate PR, generate momentum. We've got NPD planned for January, we've got NPD planned for April, and we've got NPD planned for September. So we're going to keep on with our message. We're going to keep on with our social channels that, you know, we respond to ourselves. We don't have any agency involvement in that. It's quite personal for us. And we're going to keep driving our message hard. But what we are going to do is, you know, Bernard Matthews back of old used to innovate, and then it used to communicate, and we stopped innovating and we stopped communicating, and that is what we're going to get back to doing. So, but, you know, innovating within our own values. You know, the brand has lost its way considerably over the years, and from a brand value has dropped phenomenally. So, you know, we need to get that back, and the Twizzler is a key part of our brand toolkit to enable us to do that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And Julia, just one for you. Obviously, we're kind of evolving. You know, COVID's evolving. You know, there's a vaccine apparently. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I might have it. I don't know. But do you have any sort of advice? Obviously, there's a long-term strategic vision for Nix and Kicks, but in terms of sort of short-term, over the next 6 months, do you have any plans that you formulated because of the situation, or are you sticking to the plan?
And actually, we plan all the time. You have to look at what's happening, and I spend a lot of time looking also outside of the UK and form an opinion on, you know, how other countries are dealing with the situation, trends which you see in hospitality and retail, and then sort of guesstimating what's going to happen here. And I think you need to, I mean, it's easy to constantly just end up in planning and replanning. So you have to have some sort of idea. But for us, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but we sort of anticipate we come in and out of lockdown all the time for the next sort of, you know, 4 to 6 months until the vaccine is here. And our crystal ball is that, you know, contract catering is probably not going to come back until Q4. If it comes back sooner, great, it's an uplift, but it's not something we factored in. So it's thinking about how the shopper is continuing to consume and where they're going to do that.
Thank you. I would say a sales tactic might be to put the vaccine in the drink.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of a potential. But look, one to end on before we wrap up. So, David, I guess this is one for you and Wilfred. Are you both, as sort of predominantly meat-focused companies, threatened by the growing plant-based movement, or do you see it as an opportunity?
Do you want me? I don't mind going first or second, Wilfred. It's up to you.
So, David, you go.
We're not threatened at all. No. I think it's something that we could potentially embrace, but I think there's two distinct groups within that market. There's the group of people who are buying into that because they want to reduce their red meat. And there's a group of people who are buying into that because of choice. They've gone vegan or vegetarian or what have you. It's still an incredibly small amount of the population who are doing that. There's a plethora of brands that are in there at the minute. All those brands are fighting it out. I don't think there's any clarity provided by retail. I don't think there's any clear messaging, and I think there is a bit of a bun fight going to go on over the next 6, 12, maybe 18 months with all these brands that are out there. But we don't feel threatened by it. No, I think we stick to our guns. We make great quality product. We stick to that, and if we decide to kind of move into that market, then we may well move into it. But at the minute, no, we don't feel threatened. It's good because everybody's talking about food. Everybody's talking about meat. Everybody's talking about products. That's that's what we want for sure.
Fantastic, thank you.
Mm.
Wilfred, any views? Are you fearful of the vegan brigade come bash you in, or?
Well, I'm not fearful of it, but I know change is coming.
Yeah.
Big change is coming, and that people are going to be eating less meat. And what I would say to David is this: you know, there are many stories of brands who didn't see the change and then became victims. And one sort of great example of that would be Kodak. I think you all know the story of Kodak, when they actually dominated the market, and they actually had the technology about digital photography, but they didn't believe that it was only going to be a sort of a passing trend, you know, and it took them by surprise and it wiped out their country. So for a company like Bernard Matthews or meat companies, well, because your whole business revolves around meat, to suddenly even think that actually one day it may not be there, it'd be like it may be a sackable offense. But I would say, even, you know, my business is predominantly meat, and everything that I'm doing now is saying that actually perhaps in my lifetime, and I'm 63, so, you know, talking about the next 15 to 20 years, you know, meat as we know it will not be consumed at the rate that it has been. Even I eat less meat, and, you know, I'm a real carnivore. So I would say, yes, fear is the wrong word, but I would say I'd be gearing for that is going to be the future, because again, it makes sense for the environment, for the climate. It makes sense. So that change is going to come whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I think the question that Harvey posed, Wilfred, was, do we fearful of it? And my answer remains the same. No, we don't. And I was quite clear. You know, we will choose to embrace that or not embrace that. But, you know, our brand stands for something now. We are a healthy meat. Turkey is a healthier meat. There's a significantly less amount of fat in our Twizzler than if you compare it to a pork sausage, for example, when people are aware of health. So, you know, we will stick to our guns. You know, and it's something that we are looking at, that we may embrace. But are we fearful of it? No. Why would we be fearful of it? Because any brand can adapt, and any brand can change. So no, my answer remains the same. Despite the advice, Wilfred, we're not fearful of meat free at all. Perfect.
Well, look, I think that wraps up the conversation nicely. There's no need to fear the vegans. We're all friends. They're not going to come and kill you with a carrot. A sharpened carrot shank is not on the agenda. But I think some really pertinent points, and thank you, Wilfred, for telling your story, and David for the story of the Twizzler, and Julia for how you launch in lockdown. But I think a few takeouts: so focus, courage, product innovation, and audacity, you know, are the key things that you need to see yourselves through in the next 6 months. So thank you all for taking part, and for everyone listening, and have a lovely Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wilfred.
Bye.
Thanks, David. Bye.